Have you ever wondered what it's like to start over later in life, to open your heart to new possibilities, only to find that the reality is far from what you expected? I certainly didn't. At 65, I thought I was ready for a new chapter, but what happened during a simple coffee date left me questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships. In this video, I'm going to share a personal story that not only changed the way I view companionship, but also made me rethink the very nature of trust, expectations, and love in later life. What happens when the person you meet seems perfect on paper, but their demands leave you feeling more like a business partner than a companion? If you've ever felt the pressure of navigating relationships later in life, this video is for you. I'll walk you through the red flags that can appear when expectations are too rigid, how to trust your instincts even when things seem exciting, and why true companionship should always be about mutual respect, not transactions. By the end of this video, you'll understand why being true to yourself is the most important thing you can do, and how to avoid relationships that take away from your peace of mind. Stick around for a powerful reminder of the values that matter when seeking meaningful connections as we get older. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. One day, my neighbor Linda, who has always been the one to organize community events, suggested something that I never thought I'd consider at this stage of my life. She mentioned Christine, a retired nurse who lived just a few blocks away. According to Linda, Christine was also looking for companionship, and she thought that the two of us might hit it off. Linda had a way of seeing connections where I didn't, and her enthusiasm was contagious. I found myself surprisingly open to the idea, though a part of me was hesitant. Dating, or even the thought of it, felt like a distant memory after so many years. But with Linda's gentle encouragement, I decided to take the leap and reach out to Christine. After a brief phone call, we agreed to meet at a cozy little cafe nearby. As the day approached, I noticed a sense of nervousness creeping up on me, an anxiety I hadn't experienced in years. The idea of meeting someone, especially in the context of a potential relationship, felt so foreign now. I had spent decades navigating the rhythms of work, family, and the predictable patterns of life. The freedom of retirement should have felt liberating, but suddenly I was filled with doubt. Could I connect with someone in this new chapter? What did I even wear for such an occasion? I found myself standing in front of my closet that morning, paralyzed by indecision, as I sifted through clothes I hadn't worn in years. After much deliberation, I finally settled on a crisp white shirt and a blazer I hadn't worn in ages. One that felt a bit like armor, even if I wasn't sure what I was protecting myself from. Arriving at the cafe 15 minutes early, I tried to calm my nerves by choosing a seat by the window, allowing myself to observe the world outside while I waited. I ordered a cappuccino and sipped it slowly, trying to remind myself that this wasn't a high-stakes interview, but a simple chance to get to know someone. And yet, with every passing minute, my anticipation only grew. When Christine finally walked in, right on time, I couldn't help but notice her confident air. She was dressed elegantly, wearing a light blue blouse that complemented her warm, inviting demeanor. Her smile immediately put me at ease, and as she approached, I stood up to greet her. We exchanged pleasantries, and after a brief moment of small talk, we sat down together. The first part of our conversation flowed easily. Christine shared stories about her years as a nurse, stories of helping others and navigating the ups and downs of a career she had loved. She spoke lovingly about her son, who had moved to Chicago, and how much she missed him. I shared bits and pieces of my own life. My years spent as a teacher, my daughter who now lived in New York, and my deep love for gardening. As we spoke, I was struck by how much we had in common. We both valued quiet moments, had a deep appreciation for the simple things in life, and understood the difficulty of adjusting to retirement after decades of structured work. It felt good to connect, and for a while, I allowed myself to relax and enjoy the ease of our conversation. But then, as if a subtle shift had occurred, Christine's tone changed. She leaned in a little closer, her expression softening, yet taking on a certain seriousness. She told me how much she appreciated my openness, how it was a quality she deeply valued in others. Then, she told me that she had a few expectations for any potential relationship and 4 specific conditions she needed to set. At first, I admired her candor. I respected the idea of getting everything out in the open, laying the groundwork for honesty and transparency. But as she started to explain the conditions, my initial comfort began to wane. The first of Christine's conditions was a 6-month trial period of living together. It was an unconventional suggestion, but not entirely without merit. After all, living together would offer us a chance to truly understand each other, and to test compatibility in the most practical way possible. But as she moved on to the second condition, I felt a knot form in my stomach. To proceed with this trial, she wanted me to deposit $20,000 into a shared account as a commitment deposit. The money, she explained, would demonstrate my sincerity and seriousness about the relationship. If things didn't work out, she assured me, she would refund a portion of the deposit based on the time we spent together. At that moment, I was struck by a wave of emotions: confusion, surprise, and a growing sense of discomfort. The amount of money wasn't the issue. It wasn't even about the figure itself. What troubled me was the principle behind it. It felt as though sincerity and commitment were being measured in cold, hard currency. I tried my best to maintain a neutral expression, but my mind was racing, trying to process the weight of what she had just proposed. A small part of me wanted to ask, "Are you serious?" But I didn't want to come across as rude or dismissive, so I swallowed my surprise and let her continue, even though my thoughts were already swirling. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps Christine had been hurt in the past, and this was her way of protecting herself, of ensuring that her heart wouldn't be broken again. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Relationships, especially at this stage in life, should be built on trust, mutual respect, and shared values, not on financial transactions. I couldn't help but feel that this request, however practical it might have seemed to her, turned what could have been a simple, organic connection into something that felt transactional. It wasn't about getting to know one another, building a relationship slowly over time, and finding joy in the small, everyday moments together. Instead, it felt as though she was asking for a guarantee, a kind of insurance policy on something that, in my heart, should never need one. The whole exchange left me questioning what I was truly seeking in a relationship, and whether the sincerity I had hoped for had just been replaced by a need for security and certainty. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. This wasn't at all the kind of relationship I had imagined when I decided to take the plunge back into the world of dating. I had hoped for something simple, something real, something that would allow us to explore each other's hearts and minds before diving into anything too heavy. But as Christine spoke, laying out her conditions one by one, I felt a growing unease that I couldn't quite shake. Every word she said seemed to pull me further away from the connection I had imagined. I tried to understand her reasoning, tried to see where she was coming from. Perhaps she had been hurt before. Maybe she had been betrayed in ways that left her emotionally scarred or taken advantage of financially. I couldn't help but wonder if these conditions were her way of protecting herself from being vulnerable, from opening up her heart to someone only to have it shattered once again. I could empathize with that. I really could. I understood the need to safeguard your heart when it had been broken. But even so, the more I listened, the more I realized that it didn't change the discomfort that was settling in my chest. The idea of starting a relationship based on a financial transaction, the idea that trust and sincerity would have to be proven through money, felt not only wrong but deeply unsettling. It wasn't just the money itself that bothered me, it was what the money represented. If relationships, especially one in its infancy, were to be founded on such conditions, what did that say about how she viewed connection, intimacy, and partnership. Trust, love, and understanding are supposed to be the bedrock of a relationship, not financial obligations. The more I thought about it, the more my doubt began to take root. If I had to meet a list of demands before even getting to know her, how could we possibly build something genuine and lasting? Relationships, especially at our age, should be about more than expectations. They should be about companionship and understanding, about a mutual desire to explore life together, without the weight of financial and material requirements. I wanted to connect on a deeper level, not prove myself worthy with money. Despite the growing discomfort in my chest, I chose to stay quiet, to listen without interrupting. I didn't want to judge her, and I certainly didn't want to make assumptions. After all, I had agreed to meet her with an open mind, and I felt it was only fair to hear her out. But as she moved on to describe her second condition, I found it harder and harder to reconcile what she was asking for with my values. Christine's tone shifted from businesslike to dreamlike, and I could see her enthusiasm for the next topic she was about to share. Her lifelong dream, she told me, had always been to visit Hawaii. It wasn't just any vacation, though. She envisioned a month-long getaway to the islands, one full of beauty, tranquility, and romance. I tried to smile, to show that I was interested, and on the surface, I could understand why such a trip would be so meaningful to her. Hawaii was a place of dreams for so many people, after all. But as she continued to describe it, the enormity of what she was asking for began to feel like a weight I wasn't prepared to carry. She spoke of sunset strolls on the beach, scenic helicopter tours over volcanoes, and candid snapshots taken at every significant moment of the trip. It all sounded lovely, in theory. A romantic fantasy comes to life. But then, as if the conversation had not yet tipped into uncomfortable territory, Christine explained that she expected me to cover every single expense. She said it so casually, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'll handle everything. Flights, accommodations, meals. Your only job will be to relax and enjoy," she said with a smile, her eyes gleaming with the confidence of someone who had everything planned out. I smiled politely in return, but internally, my mind was in turmoil. A trip to Hawaii, especially one lasting an entire month, was not just a casual expense. It was an enormous financial commitment. And I found myself questioning how any relationship could move forward when the foundation was built on such a grand expectation. But it wasn't just the financial aspect that troubled me. There was also something about the sheer magnitude of it all that felt overwhelming, something about the intensity of her expectations that felt too much, too soon. A professional photo shoot? In the middle of this grand vacation, she wanted to memorialize our time together in the form of a polished, posed photo shoot. She said it would symbolize our bond, that it would be a beautiful representation of our shared future. I could understand the sentiment behind it and even appreciate it on some level. A photograph can hold so much emotion, so much meaning. But the timing felt all wrong. We hadn't even spent an afternoon together yet, and here she was, imagining us posing for framed portraits, dressed in matching Hawaiian shirts as though we had known each other for years. The idea of such a commitment, so early in a relationship, was difficult for me to grasp. I couldn't help but feel a wave of unease wash over me. A month-long trip, a professional photo shoot, a level of financial investment, and emotional intimacy. All of it felt like a huge leap into a future we hadn't even begun to explore together. I wanted to believe that relationships should unfold naturally, that they should grow and evolve, without the pressure of proving anything or meeting unattainable expectations. But this felt like skipping the first chapters of a book and jumping straight to the conclusion, without ever truly understanding the characters. At that moment, I realized that what I was hoping for, what I was yearning for, wasn't this grand vision of a relationship where demands were the foundation. What I wanted was something simple and real, something that didn't require proof through financial investments or extravagant promises. It was the quiet moments of connection, the shared laughter over simple things, and the growing understanding that made relationships worthwhile. And this wasn't it. As Christine spoke, I found myself lost in thought, trying to make sense of everything she was saying. Was her obsession with grand gestures, elaborate plans, and extravagant ideas simply an expression of her personality, or was there something more profound behind it all? I couldn't help but wonder if her life, so dedicated to others, first as a nurse and then as a mother raising her son, had left her yearning for a time when she could focus solely on herself. Perhaps, after decades of selflessness, now was her moment to chase her dreams, to live for herself. While I could certainly understand the appeal of pursuing one's passions, there was something about her expectation that I alone should shoulder the financial burden of it all that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the money. It was the weight of the unspoken demand. This expectation that I prove my worth and my love through my ability to pay. The thought of being judged, or worse, valued, based on my material contributions rather than the depth of my feelings, made me feel small. I thought about what I truly wanted in a relationship. Something rooted in shared values, mutual respect, and the kind of simple pleasures that make life meaningful. I wanted companionship that was grounded in emotional connection, not one defined by monetary exchanges or pressure to meet high expectations. The more Christine spoke, the more I felt the distance between her vision and my own. The thought of embarking on a journey with such a heavy weight of obligation already in place left me with a gnawing feeling of uncertainty. How could something so important be built on such an uneven foundation? As she moved on to her third condition, my heart sank further. By now, I wasn't sure what to expect anymore, but one thing was clear. This conversation was heading into uncomfortable territory. She shifted the focus back to finances, this time in a way that left me reeling. Christine, in her calm, almost matter-of-fact tone, explained that if our trial cohabitation went well and we decided to marry, she expected full control over our household finances. My stomach churned as she laid out the terms. She wanted me to hand over my retirement income entirely, so she could manage it herself. At first, I thought it was a joke. I mean, who could seriously ask someone to surrender their hard-earned savings, their sense of security, to someone they had only just met? But as she continued, her tone unwavering and her explanation so detailed, it became clear she wasn't joking. This was real. And it felt like a heavy weight pressing down on me, crushing the little space I had left to think for myself. Christine wasn't just suggesting that we combine our finances. She was demanding total control. She explained that, with her background as a retired nurse, she was more than capable of managing money efficiently, and that she had the organizational skills and discipline to handle it all. She promised that, each month, I'd receive a small allowance to spend as I wished, while the remainder would be allocated for shared needs and future planning. The more I listened, the more it felt like she was treating me like a child. I'd worked my whole life to become financially independent, and now, out of nowhere, I was expected to hand over the reins to someone else. The idea was jarring, unnerving, and downright demeaning. And it didn't stop there. As if this request wasn't enough, Christine went on to explain that if I ever overspent my allowance, I would have to make up for it by taking on additional household chores, cooking, cleaning, whatever was needed. She framed it as a fair and practical arrangement, but to me, it felt nothing short of infantilizing. It felt as though I were being punished for trying to maintain my autonomy. This wasn't a partnership. It was control masquerading as care. By this point, I was struggling to maintain my composure. Christine's first condition had caught me off guard. Her second left me overwhelmed. But this felt like something far worse. Something that crossed a line I couldn't ignore. The idea of surrendering my financial independence to someone I barely knew felt like a betrayal to everything I had worked for. Marriage, to me, at this stage of life, should be about trust, collaboration, and mutual respect. While I could understand the value of someone taking the lead in a particular area, like managing finances, for example, there should still be space for both people to contribute, have a say, and maintain their independence. This wasn't about partnership. It felt more like an ultimatum, a power play disguised as a compromise. And it left me questioning, What kind of relationship did Christine envision? Was this her way of seeking security, or was it a means of asserting control over someone else's life? At that moment, my instincts were screaming at me to end the conversation, to walk away from this increasingly uncomfortable situation. But I stayed, partly out of curiosity, and partly because I didn't want to be rude, to seem dismissive of her wishes. As she spoke with such confidence, I could see that she believed these terms were perfectly reasonable. But deep down, I felt a knot of unease tightening in my chest. The more I listened, the more I realized that Christine and I were operating on entirely different wavelengths. Her vision of a relationship was so far removed from mine, and I began to understand that, as much as I respected her and her life experiences, this wasn't the partnership I had been hoping for. As Christine began outlining her final condition, I could feel the strain in my chest and the tightness in my stomach. It was as if the weight of each word she spoke was pulling me further and further away from the connection I had hoped for. Despite my best efforts to remain polite and to listen attentively, my patience was being tested. She explained almost matter-of-factly that no matter what form our relationship might take, whether we moved in together or even got married, she would require us to have completely separate bedrooms. At first, I was taken aback, but Christine went on to elaborate, her voice calm and resolute, explaining that after over a decade of living alone, following the end of her marriage, she had grown accustomed to the comfort of having her own space. Sharing a room, or even a bed, would feel like an invasion to her, disrupting her sleep and leaving her feeling crowded and suffocated by the presence of another person. There was a finality to her tone, a certainty that left no room for negotiation or compromise. This, she insisted, was a boundary she needed to preserve to maintain her independence. I tried, really tried, to view it through her lens, to be empathetic, to understand where she was coming from. After all, separate bedrooms were not unheard of, particularly for older couples. I knew that it could even be an arrangement that had its perks, a chance for quiet reflection, for personal space that fostered peace and respect. But in the context of everything else she had already shared, this condition added another layer of distance, one that seemed to deepen the growing chasm between us. What struck me, more than the content of her request, was the cold, transactional nature of it all. It wasn't just one isolated condition. It was a list of demands, each one meticulously laid out as if we were conducting a business deal rather than attempting to build something as personal and fragile as a relationship. Each condition seemed to revolve around her needs, her comfort, and her terms, with no genuine space for my thoughts, feelings, or desires. I was left with the unsettling feeling that these weren't the words of a potential partner, but of someone who had crafted a relationship blueprint based on protection and control rather than shared connection. As Christine finished outlining her 4 non-negotiable conditions, I felt a pang of realization. This wasn't the kind of partnership I had envisioned. When I came into this conversation, I was hoping to find someone with whom I could share quiet moments, mutual respect, and the simple joys of life. Someone to laugh with, to grow with, and to lean on in our later years. Instead, I found myself confronting a checklist that made me feel less like a partner and more like a business associate, being presented with a contract I wasn't willing to sign. I thought about the life I had built and the values I had cultivated over the years. After a lifetime of striving, working, and striving some more, I had reached a point where I yearned for peace, for tranquility in my later years. I wanted companionship that was grounded in kindness, trust, and understanding. Not a partnership where the very essence of those qualities was being stripped away in favor of cold practicality. Christine's demands, while no doubt born of her own experiences and a desire for security, felt like a direct contradiction to everything I had ever valued. Genuine love, compassion, and a shared sense of vulnerability. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. While I could acknowledge the possibility that her conditions were shaped by past hurts or a deep need for control, I couldn't escape the feeling that her approach to relationships lacked the warmth, sincerity, and tenderness that I was craving. It wasn't just the specifics of what she was asking for, it was the way she framed it all, as though love was merely a series of boxes to check off, a set of rules to follow, rather than a living, breathing thing that required compromise, generosity, and the willingness to step outside of one's comfort zone. After she finished speaking, Christine looked at me, almost expectantly, as if waiting for me to agree, to accept her conditions without question. I could see in her eyes that she believed her approach was sound, that she had carefully considered all angles. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions, trying to navigate the tension between wanting to be kind and my growing need to protect my peace. I thanked her for her honesty, for laying her cards on the table, but in the gentlest way I could muster, I explained that I didn't believe I could meet her expectations. The moment her expression shifted, I felt a wave of sadness. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, followed by a polite smile that didn't quite reach her gaze. She nodded, acknowledging my decision, but there was no further push, no attempt to sway me. It was as if the conversation had been carefully orchestrated from the beginning, and now, with my response, it had come to its logical conclusion. I made an excuse about needing to leave for an appointment, and before I knew it, I was walking out of the cafe, the weight of the conversation heavy in my chest. I walked home that afternoon, feeling a mixture of relief and profound disappointment. Relief that I had stood firm in my values, that I hadn't compromised who I was just to fit into someone else's version of a relationship. But also disappointment, the kind that settles deep in your soul, the kind that tells you that what you had hoped for, what you had yearned for, simply wasn't meant to be. When I got home, I sat on my porch, tea in hand, the world outside feeling distant, almost surreal. As I replayed the conversation in my mind, the weight of Christine's words became clearer. While I could respect her need for independence, her rigid terms, and her transactional approach made it evident that we were simply not compatible. We were too far apart in what we valued and in how we viewed relationships. And I knew, with an aching certainty, that I could never agree to such conditions without losing myself in the process. I also realized something deeper in that moment. How crucial it is to trust your instincts. Christine's decisiveness, and her confidence in her condition, had a certain strength to them, but that strength was built on a foundation of fear, not love. And that wasn't the kind of strength I sought in a companion. I wanted a partner who would meet me halfway, who would join me in creating something meaningful, something beautiful, together. I didn't want to be part of a contract. I wanted to build a life with someone who valued the same things I did: honesty, sincerity, and the willingness to grow and change together. The experience, though painful, left me with a renewed sense of what I truly wanted in life. If I couldn't find someone who shared my values and my heart's longing for mutual respect and understanding, then I'd rather continue alone than live in a relationship that wasn't right for me. Solitude, I reminded myself, wasn't the enemy. A mismatched partnership, on the other hand, could be far more painful than the quiet peace I had found in my own company. As we come to the end of this conversation, I want you to take a moment to reflect on what we've explored today. We've delved into the complexities of relationships, the importance of setting boundaries, and the courage it takes to stand by your values, even when faced with difficult decisions. The journey of self-discovery and maintaining personal peace is not always easy, but it is worth it. So, I'd love to hear from you. What has resonated with you the most from today's story? What one thing have you learned that you can bring into your own life and practice? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I truly value your insights and would love to hear how this conversation has impacted you. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave your comment below, like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Your support means the world to us, and I can't wait to continue this journey of growth and reflection with you. Thanks for watching, and take care.